Hello, Rockstars. Welcome to the Retail Leasing Playbook podcast. Today, we will be talking about Chapter 28, Make a Great Canvassing Flyer. You have to have flyers when you go canvassing. Why should you have a flyer? Well, it gets the prospect to stop looking and listening to you, which puts pressure on them and distracts them and their attention to the thing that you're handing to them, which is a flyer. My favorite flyer is the multi-center flyer, the multi-location flyer. If you have a situation where you lease multiple properties in one geographic market, you can have a flyer that has, for example, my multi-location flyer has 6 shopping centers on it. So I can walk in and literally kind of be fluttering the flyer, which is very colorful, so that they look away from me and look to the flyer. And I say, I have 6 shopping centers in the area. What are your expansion plans? I hand that to them while I'm speaking to them. Again, obviously this means that they're not with a customer in their space, right? They're standing alone at their desk or in the store somewhere. And they start to look at the flyer. A lot of times, the store clerk or the gatekeeper or the owner will say, oh, I know that shopping center. That's where I shop for my groceries. Or they might say, oh, where's this one? And on the back of that multi-location flyer, I include a map so that we can turn it over and say, this is where this is, in maybe near this mall, etc. And it gives us something to be looking at together and sharing common, interest, common ground. Oh, I live here. Oh, I shop here. The multi-location flyer has a small thumbnail picture and a couple of highlights as far as maybe the population, the income, and the major tenants. If you don't, and the other really great thing about the multi-location flyer is it's a lot harder for a prospect to say no on a multiple of choices versus one, right? So if you walk in, let's say you have a shopping center that you're leasing in Baton Rouge, and you have one shopping center in Baton Rouge. You walk in and say, hi, I have this center in the community. Are you interested? It's very easy for the prospect to say no when you're just presenting a choice of, no choice. You're just presenting one option. If you walk in and say, hey, I have 20 shopping centers in Louisiana area, usually the prospect will say, oh, well, where are they, right? Because 20, how do they just know off the bat that they don't want any of the 20? So if you have the good luck to have more properties than just one in a specific geography, I highly recommend the multi-location flyer. If you don't, that's okay too, but always lease with a flyer. I had a situation the other day where I was talking to a coaching client and they were going to have a listing appointment to get a new shopping center. And he hadn't prospected in a while or canvassed. And I said, well, why don't you, do an hour of canvassing after you leave that prospecting appointment? And he said, oh, I can't. I don't have any flyers with me. And I said, well, call your assistant and find a printer in the area and get her to send the file over, an email with the attachment, and get 10 or 20 printed. But you should always have, like what I do is I have about 50 flyers in my car at all times. Because you never know where you might be driving by somewhere and go, oh, that's a new store. I never saw that before, and just swing in and drop off one. I've even sent my son, when he was 7 years old, in a baseball uniform to go into a new dry cleaner drop that I had seen in my neighborhood. So definitely the multi-location flyers, keeping flyers in your car. If you have a space that has infrastructure in it, for example, a former restaurant, a second-gen restaurant, a former urgent care, a former office space. In the book, there are examples of where I have taken pictures of valuable infrastructure that would work for another user and created a separate flyer for those. In one instance, years ago, I had a client who had a former hair salon. And in the hair salon, it had about 15 chairs, mirrors, shampoo bowls, you name it in there. It was beautiful space. And he hadn't leased it for 3 years. And I said, have you ever done a flyer with pictures? And he said, no, this is like a principal owner, lived in Canada. So we did a flyer, and we went around within a mile or 2 miles of the shopping center and handed out about 50 of those flyers and had a lease within about a week. Because think about it, the hair salon owner is not driving around, parking his car in a large parking lot, getting out of his car, walking up to every potential what looks like a vacancy, looking in the window saying, I wonder if there's any shampoo bowls and chairs in here, right? They're not going to do that. They're not going to think that there is a former hair salon space. So you have to take the information to them. You need to take the picture, put it on a flyer, and then go pass it around to all of the users in the area, whether that's a restaurant, an urgent care, an office space. I had once an insurance office that was getting ready to move out. So I took pictures of the office space before they packed up and moved out. And then I used that and used it to pass around to real estate offices in the area and got a lot of people interested because of the flyer. I don't want you spending hours and hours and hours of creating a flyer if you don't have a marketing team that works with you. Josie does our flyers, and sometimes the interns that I have that work with me do it. We've used Canva, but also if you don't have a Josie, there's something called Fiverr, Fiverr, I think is how you spell it. And for very cheap, you can send them information and they will create a flyer for you. So don't spend a lot of time. Kara, my intern, who then turned to be a leasing agent for a couple of years, played around with Canva. But, if you're in leasing, I want you to be leasing. And if you can whip out a flyer in 20 minutes, that's one thing. But if it takes you hours, not a good, valuable use of your time. So you have to have a flyer when you go canvas. It's a must. I like to put my information on the flyer, my name, my cell phone, etc. I know a lot of companies don't want to do that, so you should always staple your business card to your flyer. Because if you hand the business card over to them separate from the flyer, you know that that's going to get lost and then they won't have your contact information. So I've been on tours with my canvassing workshops where we grab a stapler from the office, a bunch of business cards, and on the way to canvassing, we're stapling people's business cards to the flyers. So definitely do that. I don't put the rent in the flyer. That's our job to have a dialogue about that. So I never put the rent on the flyer. And also on those second gen flyers, it would be great to put the air conditioning tonnage, the electrical ampage, if there's a hood, how big is the hood, if there's a grease trap, how many gallons. The more information you can put on the flyer, the better. Think about that business owner who wasn't there when you canvassed. They come back into their restaurant, and in their office on their desk is this very colorful flyer with pictures of a second-gen restaurant with the size of the hood, the grease trap, outdoor seating, yada, yada, yada. That would be a great tool for them to pick that up and say, oh, I'm interested in this. Let me call this leasing agent. So that is chapter 28, Making a Great Canvassing Flyer. And if you do have the book, the pictures of the examples of the flyers are on pages 122, 123, 124, 125. So definitely go ahead and check that out. And I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you are, I would love for you to subscribe and share, or even put a comment so that we can get more people listening to the podcast. Thanks. I hope this is helping you guys. Thanks for being a good, supportive listener. And you have been listening to the Retail Leasing Playbook podcast, and that was on chapter 28. Talk to you guys later.